Hey everyone, welcome to my new ugly home in Houston. We're going to be doing some pretty major work on it, and I actually have some HVAC contractors here right now. They're up in the attic, so if you hear any banging, that is why. They are doing quite a few things up there before we actually go ahead and replace the 2 AC units and also 2 furnaces, because everything in Houston is pretty much divided by floor, because you kind of need it here. It's like 100 something degrees outside. It's actually getting hot in here. I'm getting a little shiny because they had to reroute. That basically they have all the fans blowing on them in the attic, otherwise it'd be like 120 degrees up there right now. So it's getting pretty hot down here. It's like about 80, 82 and climbing here on the ground floor. But like I said, we're going to be doing some pretty significant work. That's just one part of many. We got window guy was here earlier today, and he was measuring everything out. They're going to be replacing all the windows with dual pane windows. These are all pretty old and also single pane, which is kind of ridiculous at a place like this. It's has such extreme hot weather. You want as much insulation as you can. Plus the windows are just toast anyways. But going to be redoing all the interior as well. We're not keeping this absolutely gorgeous, delicious wallpaper, but won't be keeping that. We'll be doing getting rid of that as well, placing all the flooring, and I'll definitely keep you posted and keeping you along for the ride, because it's going to be expensive. It's going to be my big focus for the next at least month. But probably financially for a few months after that, at least, as I recoup my earnings and actually pay to pay down the expenses with all these projects we're going to be doing. It's going to be expensive. We're looking at least 50 grand, maybe approaching, we'll call it 75 grand, but it depends on whether we replace the roof or not. It's kind of on its last legs. I might try to extend the life out, but I'm kind of rambling. I do want to talk about this decision to move to Houston, because it's a big one. I'm from Chicago. Really from the Chicago suburbs. I've been in Chicago itself for the last few years, and my wife has grown up in Chicago her entire life, and so this is a big move for her too. It's a big move for both of us, and it's a decision we're not taking lightly. The main reason we're moving down here is because of a job opportunity. My wife got a really great job down here, and my law firm has an office here, so it's easy enough to make the transfer for me, and it's a great opportunity for her, so it seemed like a win-win on the career front. And then with everything else, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. You have the tax benefits of moving from Illinois to Texas, that you slash the income tax payment that we would have to make to the state of Illinois, so that's gone. That's an instant 5% raise right there. Now, a lot of people bring up that Texas has really high property taxes, and that's true nationally speaking, but Chicago, Cook County is even higher, so it's a win there too for us. It's going from very high to just high, so it's a benefit there too. So financially, it's looking good that way too. Although we will be spending some more money on some other things that we wouldn't have in Chicago, like getting an extra car, making flights back to Chicago to see family. So that's going to add up, and it's going to eliminate some of that financial benefit. But in the meantime, we can also afford a much, much larger house. Just square footage wise, we get a lawn and everything, and I'll show you more about this house as we move through the project. I'm going to show some before and after and take you through the rehab process, but you can get a lot more house for your dollar here compared to somewhere like Chicago, even though Chicago is not a ludicrously expensive market compared to something like Houston, where if you want a single family home, you can get one pretty cheap, relatively speaking. Real estate's expensive across the board, but compared to Chicago, you're probably looking at almost half the cost in many sort of equivalent areas. They're different cities, so it's kind of hard to equate something, say, on the lake shore compared to something in the middle of Houston. It's a different ballgame, but anyways, it's cheaper there too. I'm still focusing on finances, because that is probably the number one benefit and a big reason we're making this move. Also, you have the growth tailwinds that Texas is seeing, so ideally that could be fruitful in the long term. You have more people moving here. Growth is always a good thing for economic activity, bringing jobs and all the things associated with people moving into a place. So that should be a good thing too. And to that, on the flip side, there's some push factors from Chicago too, in that Chicago's long-term future, I'm pretty nervous about, at least relative to a lot of other places. They have some serious problems, the state of Illinois especially, with their massive pension crisis you may or may not have heard of, and a number of other political deficiencies, we'll say, with mainly handling the budget over many decades, a lot of corruption, all the things that Chicago and Illinois are so well known for. Not that Texas doesn't have its own problems, of course it does. And then there's also the sort of rising crime issue in Chicago. We haven't really had too much effect of it because we've been way at the north of the city, so very far towards the edge of it. So we're not like, you know, in the middle of everything. But it's pretty lively. It's still a lot of people down there. But, you know, there's just some things that make you a little bit nervous sometimes. And certainly using the transit there is getting a lot more uncomfortable because the rule of law is not really enforced like it was before. And even then it was kind of shaky. So those are some of the push factors. But the biggest negative with this move is the fact that we're leaving family. We don't have any family down in Houston. We got a couple friends, that's about it. We don't have, both of our families are predominantly based in Chicagoland, so the fact we're leaving to Houston, we can't be, you know, right on top of them. We can't see them the same day nearly as easily as we could if we were still up there. So we are still in the same time zone, so you have something there, in that we can make a quick 2.5 hour flight back up to Chicago if we wanted to, which we will be doing pretty frequently. So it's not as though it's the end of the world. It's not like we're out in Singapore or something and it's going to be like a day-long flight or something like that. So it shouldn't be the end of the world, but it's harder, and it's something we're going to have to plan for, and it's not nearly as convenient as it might have been before. So that's a big negative factor with this move, and something we're going to be wrestling with. And if all goes well, because it's so affordable down here, maybe we could bring some family down. That would mean things went really great here, because there's a chance they don't that they don't go well, of course. But if they go great, that's a great thing for the family too, because then we can start bringing some people down here. If we give them the green light saying, hey, it's really awesome down here, come on down. And that's just a win for everyone. But you can't figure that out until someone goes down and checks it out. So that's kind of what my wife and I are doing. At least that's my perspective on it. You may not be able to hear it on the microphone, but the fridge back there is something like 20 years old. I don't know, I haven't actually checked the year, but it sounds like an idling car. We're going to be replacing it when we update this kitchen. But it's very loud, so I apologize if you can hear that. But not enough to film outside because it's really hot. Speaking of heat, that's another factor that's going to be very different than Chicago. The weather, it is much hotter here, which I think will be overall a big benefit, at least from my perspective. I like the warmth, though this is very, very hot, so it's not as though you can, you know, go, I mean, you can do whatever you want outside, I guess, but it's going to be a lot more uncomfortable than if it was a nice, balmy 80 degrees instead of 100 degrees and humid. So that's a big difference, but the winter should be way more mild than the brutal ones that you get in Chicago, where you're getting plenty of 0-degree days every year, lots hovering in the 20s. It's just very uncomfortable, and you can't really do anything out there. At least when it's hot, you can still walk outside and it doesn't hurt. It's still uncomfortable, but I am not a fan of the really freezing cold that Chicago gets every single year. So that should be overall a benefit. And I guess we can kind of be like snowbirds of sorts. And besides coming up for the holidays, of course, we could always kind of enjoy the warm weather during the winter down in Houston and come up for that really nice sort of right now, like August weather. July, August, September in Chicago is usually really great. It's my favorite time of year there. So we can kind of coordinate a lot of our vacations to go back there perhaps. But that's for a future date. But I think overall with this whole thing, we just have to come in with an open mind, try to see what the good opportunities are. If this is working really well, that's great. We'll tell people about it and try to get more people on board. That would be the best case scenario. Worst case, this is a total disaster. My wife hates her job. Something goes terrible with mine, and it just makes sense to move somewhere else, maybe move back. So easy enough to move back. Yeah, it'd be a hassle and be expensive, relatively speaking, but if we had to do it, we could do it. It's not as though we can't. That's one of the great advantages of being in a place like the US, in that there's a lot of different states, cities to choose from, and you have generally freedom of movement. You can move around and try different places out, which is a really great benefit that it's not really as feasible in a lot of different places. And I'm definitely excited to document this whole process with the house. I think it's going to be a fun though expensive project, and I'm really excited to see what the actual end product looks like, because what we're working with now is not exactly up my alley, but we knew that going in, and that's why we got a decent price on it. I don't think this was a great deal, and it's probably not going to be a money-making deal, but it's not as though it's a disaster, barring a huge market collapse, which could always happen. But regardless, if you guys want to see more about this deal or any of the other things I'm doing, or whatever else that you watch this channel for, then be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that great stuff. And until next time, take care. Man, I feel like I need to shower after this. All right, until next time.